People think a sharp mind at 90 comes from crossword puzzles, vitamins, or good blood, but that was never the real problem. At my age, I can tell you this without drama. The mind usually does not go dark all at once. It dims slowly when a person stops meeting the morning, like they still belong to the day. I learned that too late, and I paid for it with fear, confusion, and a kind of quiet surrender that nearly took more from me than age ever did. I am 91 years old now, and I did not arrive here with some noble wisdom intact from the beginning. I was not one of those graceful old women who accepted change with a soft smile and a cup of tea by the window. I was proud, useful, organized, and busy for most of my life. I raised children, buried a husband, kept a household running on less money than people thought possible, and made myself necessary in ways no one ever thanked me for properly. I do not say that with bitterness. I say it because it matters. When you spend 60 years being needed, the silence that comes after can sound like a verdict against your worth. That was the season I nearly lost myself. People around me said I was only tired. They said, at your age, slow down. They said forgetting little things was normal. They said I had earned the right to rest. What they meant was kind enough, I suppose, but it was the worst advice I could have followed, because rest is one thing, sliding out of your own life is another. It started after my daughter insisted I stop driving at night. She was probably right. My eyes were not what they used to be, and the glare from headlights had begun to smear across the windshield like wet paint. Then came little concessions that sounded sensible in the moment. My grandson set up grocery delivery. A neighbor offered to pick up my prescriptions. My son put larger labels on my pill bottles. Everyone called it help. None of them noticed that every small kindness was also removing one more reason for me to think ahead, get dressed, step outside, remember a list, speak to a cashier, or move through the world as someone still responsible for her own day. I did not understand that at the time. I thought the danger was forgetting names, misplacing my glasses, walking into a room and losing track of why I had gone there. But the deeper danger was different. The deeper danger was letting the day happen around me instead of entering it on purpose. Once that began, my mornings turned shapeless, and shapeless mornings are cruel to an old mind. I would wake late, sometimes still tired, though I had done nothing to deserve fatigue. I would sit on the edge of the bed in my nightgown, looking at the slippers on the rug as if they belonged to somebody else. The room would be quiet in that heavy way only an old house can be quiet. Not peaceful, just still enough to hear the refrigerator hum down the hall and the pipes knock once in the wall. I would think I should get up. Then I would think, for what? That question is more dangerous than people know. Some mornings I would stay in that chair by the bedroom window until nearly 10, cardigan over my shoulders, hands wrapped around coffee gone lukewarm. I stopped making proper breakfast. Sometimes I ate crackers, sometimes nothing. The bed stayed unmade. The curtains remained half closed. I stopped opening the back door to let fresh air into the kitchen. I told myself none of it mattered because no one was coming by, but that was not true. It mattered because I was there. Then the small mistakes began to multiply. One Tuesday, I put the milk in the pantry and did not find it until evening. Another morning, I took my blood pressure pills, then stood at the sink 10 minutes later, staring at the bottle, unable to remember whether I had taken them or only meant to. I started writing reminders on scraps of paper, then losing the scraps of paper. Once I left soup simmering too long, and the smell of scorched celery and broth lingered in the curtains for 2 days. I cried over that pot like it was proof my mind was breaking. But even that was not the part that hurt most. What hurt most was the look on my daughter's face when she tried not to show concern. She came over on a Thursday afternoon with clementines and a loaf of sliced bread I had not asked for. I remember the way she paused in the kitchen doorway. The dish towel was still draped over the oven handle from the night before. Mayo lay unopened near the salt shaker. I had not brushed my hair properly. She did not say anything cruel. That is often not how humiliation arrives. Sometimes it arrives through gentleness. She touched my arm and said, "Mom, are you keeping up with things?" Keeping up with things. I had once kept up with an entire family, a mortgage, holidays, stomach viruses, grief, and lean winters. I had sewn curtains, balanced checkbooks, remembered dentist appointments, packed lunches, and sat through fevers in a straight back chair until dawn. And now I was being asked whether I was keeping up with things. I smiled and told her I was fine. She smiled too, but neither of us believed me. That evening, after she left, I stood in the kitchen with one hand on the counter and one hand still holding the orange she had brought. I remember the smell of citrus on my fingers. The house was dim by then, and the glass cabinet above the sink reflected a tired woman I did not quite recognize. Not because she looked old. I had already made peace with old. What unsettled me was that she looked absent, like a person halfway erased. That was when I realized something I wish I had learned 30 years earlier. The mind does not stay alive simply because the body is still breathing. It stays alive when it is invited daily into responsibility, order, attention, and contact with the real world. The next morning I woke before 6 without meaning to. The sky outside was still grey-blue, and for a minute I lay there listening to a bird pecking somewhere near the gutter. My first instinct was to roll over and drift back into that useless half-sleep that leaves you duller than before. But something in me had grown ashamed of how easily I had been disappearing. I sat up, put both feet on the floor, and said out loud into the empty room, "No, not today. It sounds small now. It did not feel small then. I made my bed before I used the bathroom. Not perfectly, but fully. I pulled the sheet straight, smoothed the blanket, arranged the pillows, and opened the curtains wide. Morning light came in pale and honest. Dust showed on the dresser. Fine, let it show. I took off my nightgown and put on a proper blouse, slacks, and my good house shoes instead of shuffling around as if I were waiting to be pitied. Then I went to the kitchen and cooked 2 eggs and a little butter, toasted 1 slice of bread, cut half an apple, and sat down at the table to eat it on a plate, not in my chair, not standing at the sink, at the table. I cannot explain to younger people how powerful that felt, to sit upright in the morning, dressed, fed, and facing the day before the day had a chance to swallow me. It did not cure my memory in one sunrise. It did something more important. It returned me to myself, and before that week was over, I added the second thing. Then, almost by accident, the third. What those 3 small choices did to my mind, and to the rest of my life, surprised even me. The second thing began because of the mailbox. For weeks I had been letting the mail pile up in the brass slot by the front door. Circulars, bank envelopes, a church bulletin, 2 birthday cards I opened late, and 1 electric bill I nearly missed because I could not bring myself to sort through the little paper mountain. It was not laziness, it was worse than laziness. It was avoidance. When the mind starts slipping, even small unfinished things begin to stare back at you. A closed envelope can feel like judgment. A full sink can feel like failure. That morning after breakfast, I stood at the door holding my cup, looking at the porch through the screen, and I felt that old resistance rise in me again. Then I put the cup down, unlocked the door, and stepped outside before I could argue with myself. The air was cold enough to wake the skin on my arms. It smelled faintly of damp earth and cut grass from somewhere down the block. I could hear a dog collar jingling, and farther off a garbage truck lowering its metal mouth with a bang that echoed between the houses. Nothing extraordinary happened. No choir of angels. No miracle. But my mind sharpened in a way I had not felt in months. The world was moving. The day was already underway. And standing there in it, I felt less like an old object stored in a quiet room and more like a person expected to participate. So that became the second thing. Every morning I had to go outside, even if only for 10 minutes. Not later when the day was half spoiled, not after sitting too long. In the morning before hesitation gathered its strength. Sometimes I walked only to the mailbox and back. Sometimes to the corner. Sometimes I stood on the porch with my hand around the railing and let the light hit my face while I breathed until my chest felt open. On rainy days I stood beneath the little overhang and listened to water tapping the steps. On colder mornings I buttoned my coat wrong with stiff fingers and laughed at myself and fixed it at the gate. The point was not exercise in the grand sense people talk about. The point was contact. Light, air, distance, direction. The mind needs proof that the world is still real and that you are still inside it. I did not know how badly I needed that until the morning I nearly fell back into my old fog. It was a Monday and I had slept poorly. My knees ached, my neck felt tight, and there was a heaviness in me that made the bed seem persuasive. I thought, one morning mist will not matter. That is how decline speaks, by the way. It does not demand surrender all at once. It asks only for one exception, then another, until the exception becomes your life. I almost listened, but then I remembered the look in that kitchen glass, the woman who had seemed half erased, and I got up angry. I dressed, made the bed, ate my eggs, and went outside with my coat half buttoned and my mood no better than the weather. The sky was low and white, and my joints complained all the way to the sidewalk, but by the time I reached the mailbox, I was noticing things again. A crooked daffodil in Mrs. Turner's flower bed. The newspaper thrown too close to the curb across the street. A little boy in a red jacket dragging his backpack as if school were an insult. These were not important events, yet paying attention to them pulled my mind outward, and that mattered. A mind turned only inward can become a trap. That was when I understood the second lesson more clearly. Do not begin the day trapped inside your own head. Put your body where your mind can meet something other than fear. The third thing came from a humiliation I have not forgotten. My son called one evening and asked whether I had made the appointment with the eye doctor. I told him yes. He asked for the date. I could not remember it. I said it was written down somewhere. While he waited on the phone, I opened 2 drawers, moved a stack of coupons, checked beside the phone, checked inside my handbag, and felt my face getting hot, though no one could see me. He kept saying, "That's okay, Mom, take your time," in the slow voice that old children use when they are trying not to sound alarmed. I hated that voice. Not because he meant harm, but because it reduced me in my own ears. I found the appointment card at last, tucked inside a recipe box for no reason I could explain. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table long after dark, one hand resting on that little white card as if it were evidence in a case against me. The clock above the stove ticked louder than usual. The dishes were done. The house smelled faintly of dish soap and onion from the soup I had made. Everything around me was ordinary, yet I felt stripped of confidence. That was not even the part that hurt most. What hurt most was knowing I had begun to live without a system after spending a lifetime building systems for everyone else. I had once kept order, not because I loved rules, but because order protects dignity. It saves memory from unnecessary strain. It gives shape to responsibility. Without it, the mind wastes strength trying to recover what simple habits should have held in place. So the next morning, after I came in from the porch, I took out a lined yellow notepad and wrote the date in large, careful letters. Under it, I wrote 3 lines only. What day is this? What must be done today? Who will I speak to today? That became the third thing. Not 10 tasks, not some foolish list written to impress no one. Just 3 anchors. Name the day, name the duty, name the human connection. Monday, wash the towels, pay the water bill, call Ruth. Tuesday, sweep the kitchen, check the pills, send Lily the birthday card. Wednesday, chicken soup, change the sheets, speak to someone with my whole attention. Some mornings the duty was as small as watering the plant by the sink and clearing the papers by the phone. Some days the human connection was only saying more than fine when the cashier asked how I was. But writing it down changed something important. It told my mind, you are not drifting, you have entered the day with intention. And I kept that pad on the table where I could see it, not hidden in a drawer like a secret weakness. Within 3 weeks, the fog began to lift in ways I had not expected. I was misplacing fewer things. I was less panicked when I forgot something because I had fewer loose ends flying around the house. I stopped taking my pills twice or wondering if I had missed them because I added a check mark beside that morning's duty. I opened my mail the same day I brought it in. I began cooking simple meals again instead of picking at nonsense. Oatmeal with cinnamon, tomato soup and toast, chicken thighs with carrots on Sundays. Nothing fancy, but real food on real plates. My thoughts felt steadier when my mornings were steady. There is a connection there people do not respect enough. Then one afternoon my daughter stopped by unannounced. I was at the sink rinsing spinach. The back door was open to let in air. My shoes were on. The radio was playing softly from the counter, some old song I knew without needing to place it. On the table sat my yellow pad, my reading glasses, and a grocery list written in full sentences so I would not confuse myself later. She looked around the kitchen and said nothing at first. Then she smiled in a way that carried relief more than politeness. "You seem better," she said. I answered too quickly, "I am better." But after she left, I sat down and admitted to myself that the truth was more fragile than that. I was better, yes, sharper, steadier, more present, but I was also only beginning to understand how close I had come to handing over my life, not to illness, but to surrender. And just when I started feeling stronger, something happened with Ruth from 2 houses down that showed me how lonely a person can look while still appearing completely fine. Ruth was 78, which sounded young to me until I saw how she moved that spring. She had been a sturdy woman once, broad-shouldered, quick with her hands, always carrying something practical, a casserole dish, a bag of mulch, a folded lawn chair for the church picnic. After her husband died, she kept her house neat enough, waved when she saw me, and told everyone she was managing. That word again, managing, it covers a great deal of pain. One Wednesday morning, after I had written my 3 lines on the yellow pad and walked to the mailbox, I saw her standing at the curb in her robe and slippers, with the trash bin tipped on its side. The lid had blown open, and papers were caught in the hedge. I called out, "Ruth, are you all right?" She startled like I had pulled her from deep water. "Oh yes," she said too fast. "I'm fine. I just came out for a second." But she was not fine. Her hair was uncombed. Her face had that blank, overtired look I knew too well. And the oddest part was that she did not seem embarrassed about the robe or the slippers or the fallen bin. She seemed detached from the whole scene, as if none of it properly belonged to her. I walked over, gathered the papers, righted the bin, and asked if she had eaten. She laughed a little and said, "Coffee." That laugh told me everything. I said, "Come to my kitchen in 20 minutes. I'm making eggs." She started to refuse. I did too once, whenever help threatened my pride. But maybe she heard something in my voice that was not pity. It was invitation, plain and direct. She nodded and said, "All right then." That morning changed more than I expected. I set the table for 2, not beautifully, just honestly. 2 plates, 2 forks, butter in the little dish with the chip on the rim, toast in a basket lined with a clean towel. When Ruth came in, she looked around the kitchen as if she had stepped into a place she remembered from another life. The radio was low. The kettle steamed. Morning light lay across the table and warmed the wood in long pale stripes. She sat down carefully and wrapped both hands around the mug I gave her before she drank. For the first few minutes we said nothing important. That is how real comfort often begins, not with deep speeches, with butter, heat, and a chair that does not ask too much of you. Then she looked at my yellow pad and asked, "What's that?" I told her. I expected her to smile politely and let it pass. Instead, her eyes filled so suddenly that she had to look away. She said, very quietly, "I don't think I know what day it is half the time unless the garbage truck comes." There it was, not memory loss in the dramatic way people fear, something sadder and more common, a life that had lost its edges. We ate our eggs, and little by little the truth came out. She had stopped going out in the mornings because she was sleeping badly and did not see the point. Her daughter called, but mostly in a hurry between errands. Her son lived 3 states away and sent articles about healthy aging that only made her feel like a project. She had begun leaving the television on all day just to hear a voice in the house. Twice she had forgotten wet laundry in the washer until it smelled sour. Once she had gone 3 days without speaking to another person face to face. She told me all this while staring at the steam from her coffee, and I could hear in her voice the things she was not saying directly. "I am disappearing, and people call it normal because I am old." That was when I understood something else. A sharp mind is not only protected by what you do alone, it is also protected by whether your life still contains exchange, conversation, being expected, being answered. The mind needs friction. It needs another person now and then, not to rescue it, but to wake it. So I said, "Come tomorrow morning too." She blinked at me. "For eggs?" "For whatever is on the table." That simple arrangement became our quiet discipline. 3 mornings a week, Ruth came over at 8:30. On the other mornings, if the weather allowed, we met at the mailbox and walked to the corner and back. We were not performing wellness for anybody. We were building structure with company. Some days we talked about foolish things, a terrible haircut someone's grandson had gotten, whether canned peaches were better 20 years ago, which hymn people always dragged too slowly. Some days we talked about harder things, the insult of being spoken to as if we were fragile, The ache of hearing your children discuss you in practical tones, as if love and logistics had become the same thing. The shame of needing help and the greater shame of giving up too early because help had come. But then I noticed something worse. Even as my mornings improved, I still had an old habit clinging to me like damp cloth. I explained myself too much, to my children, to the pharmacist, to the woman at church who asked why I had missed 2 Sundays. To everyone, I offered reasons, justifications, soft apologies, little nervous speeches meant to prove I was still competent, still kind, still not difficult. It exhausted me. More than that, it trained my mind toward defensiveness the moment the day began. One Friday, my daughter called and said, "Mom, maybe you should let me handle your banking online from now on. It might be easier." There was love in her voice, but there was assumption too. The old me would have rushed into explanation. I would have listed all the bills I had already paid, mentioned the notepad, described the new routine, tried to sound capable without sounding offended. Instead, I stood at the counter with one hand on the bread knife and looked out the window at Ruth adjusting her scarf at the gate. Then I answered simply, "No, thank you. I'm managing it myself, and if I need help, I'll ask." There was a pause. Then she said, "Okay, Mom." That was all. No fight, no collapse, no punishment. Just a boundary stated without trembling. I cannot tell you how much mental strength that saved me. Protecting the mind at 90 is not only about memory games and sleep and fresh air, it is also about stopping the leaks, stopping all the needless emotional draining that comes from over-explaining your existence. After that, I added another quiet rule to my mornings. Before 10 o'clock, I would not hand over my peace. I would not begin the day with apologizing, doom-scrolling through worry, or rehearsing old hurts. I would make the bed, I would dress, I would eat, I would step outside, I would write the day down, and I would speak to myself and to others like a grown human being, not like a defendant in a courtroom. The effect of that surprised me more than the eggs or the walking. My thoughts grew cleaner, not perfect, but cleaner. When I forgot a word, I did not panic so fast. When something went wrong, I corrected it instead of spiraling. I started reading again for half an hour after breakfast, pencil in hand, underlining lines so my mind had to stay present. I put the phone in the drawer until after I had finished my morning list, because I noticed how one anxious call or one silly piece of bad news could scatter me for hours. I kept a cardigan on the chair by the door so I would have no excuse not to step out. I polished my shoes on Sundays. I cleared the sink every night so morning would not begin with evidence of neglect. These sound like little things to people who are still rushing through crowded middle years. They are not little things, they are rails on a narrow bridge. Then, near the beginning of June, my grandson came by with a grocery bag in one arm and worry hidden poorly behind a cheerful face. He had not seen me in nearly a month, and what he said at my kitchen table that afternoon told me exactly how much people notice when an old person begins to vanish, even when they do not know how to name it. He set the bag down on the table and looked at me for a second longer than usual. Inside the bag were peaches, a carton of eggs, tea I liked, and a loaf of rye bread I had not asked for. Young people do that when they are worried. They bring provisions as if concern can be folded inside groceries. I took the peaches out one by one and set them near the bowl by the window. Their skins were warm from the car, and the kitchen filled with that faint sweet smell ripe fruit has before it softens. My grandson leaned against the counter and said with more care than casualness, "You look different." I smiled. Older, I assume. He laughed, but his eyes did not leave my face. "No, more here." That stayed with me. More here. Not smarter, exactly, not younger, not cured of age or spared its losses, just more present, more inside my own life again. And hearing that from someone who had no reason to flatter me meant more than any article about brain health or aging well ever could. Young people are quicker than we think. They know when we are with them and when we are fading in plain sight. We sat down and I made tea while he told me about work, traffic, and some ridiculous problem with his apartment ceiling. I listened all the way through without reaching for my thoughts, without drifting, without pretending while my mind wandered somewhere else. I noticed how his hands moved when he talked, how tired he looked beneath the eyes, how relieved he seemed to be in a quiet kitchen with no performance required of him. Then he said something that caught me off guard. A while back he told me, staring into his cup, Mom was worried about you. She said sometimes when she came over, it felt like you were in the room, but not really in the room. I did not answer right away. The kettle clicked softly as it cooled. Outside, someone shut a car door, and a dog barked twice down the street. I peeled the label from the tea box with my thumbnail and laid it flat beside the sugar bowl. Then I said, "She was right. There is a dignity in telling the truth plainly once you are old enough to stop decorating it." He nodded, as if that answer itself relieved him. Then he said, "You don't feel like that now." I looked at him and thought how easy it is for families to speak around the real thing for years. We say tired when we mean lonely. We say forgetful when we mean unmoored. We say slowing down when what we mean is this person has stopped being expected anywhere. I had nearly accepted all those softened descriptions because they sounded gentler than the truth. But gentle lies are still lies. So I told him what I had learned. I told him a sharp mind is not defended by fear. It is defended by use, by order, by contact, by the decision to meet the morning before the morning teaches you that you are unnecessary. I told him that when a person stops dressing for the day, stops sitting at the table, stops going outside, stops naming what must be done, the mind begins to lose its grip not only on memory but on meaning, and meaning is what keeps the mind willing. He listened more seriously than I expected a younger man to listen, maybe because he loved me, maybe because he was hearing beneath my words a warning for his own life one day. When I finished, he reached over and touched the yellow pad lying beside my glasses. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. What are the 3 things now?" I looked at the page. That day it read Friday, return library book, make lentil soup, call Ruth if it rains. I tapped the pad lightly and said, "Begin the day properly, step into the world early, decide what the day is for." He smiled. "That's it. That is more than enough." But after he left, I stood at the sink washing 2 cups and realized that even those 3 things had roots deeper than habit. They were not random tricks. They were a way of answering 3 dangers that wait for us in old age. The first danger is neglecting yourself because no one is watching. So you get dressed anyway, you make the bed anyway, you eat from a plate anyway. You do these things because self-respect must not depend on an audience. The second danger is living only inside your own walls and your own thoughts. So you go outside early, you let light reach your eyes. You walk to the mailbox, the corner, the gate, wherever your body can still carry you. You look at something beyond your own worry, a tree branch, a passing bus, a woman watering petunias. The world does not heal everything, but it interrupts the lie that you are already gone. The third danger is drift, hours with no shape, no sequence, no expectation. So you name the day. You write down one real duty and one real human contact. Not because busyness is holy, it is not, but direction matters, even at 90, especially at 90. What happened after that was quiet, which is the honest way most salvations happen. Summer settled in, Ruth kept coming by, sometimes we shelled peas at the table, sometimes we played 2 terrible hands of cards and accused each other of cheating. I grew basil in a pot by the back step and brushed it with my fingers when I went out in the mornings, just to smell something green and alive. My daughter still worried, but differently now, less like a woman bracing for loss and more like a daughter learning to see her mother as a full person again. My son still offered help, and sometimes I took it. That is another lesson I learned late. Dignity is not refusing all help. Dignity is knowing what is still yours to carry and not abandoning it too soon. I still forget things now and then. Let us be honest. At 91, I am not pretending to be polished oak. I misplace a pen. I lose a word and find it 20 minutes later while buttering toast. I read a paragraph twice on tired days. My knees predict rain more accurately than the television. Age has not stopped being age, but fear no longer runs the house. That is the difference. A weak morning used to spread through my whole day like spilled tea. Now the morning steadies the rest of me. The bed made, curtains open, clothes on, breakfast at the table, a little air on my face, a page with the date written clearly. Those are simple things, yes, but simple does not mean small. A key is simple, so is a latch, so is the hand that turns it. If you want to keep your mind sharp at 90, do not wait until you are frightened to start living with intention. Do not hand the morning over to confusion, passivity, or that slow humiliation of becoming careless with yourself. Rise, order something, step outside, give the day a name before the day decides who you are. I used to think the great battle of old age was against memory loss alone. I was wrong. The real battle is against disappearance, and the good news, if you want to call it that, is that disappearance often begins with small things, which means return can begin there too. A bedspread pulled smooth, shoes put on before doubt speaks, a front door open to the morning, 3 lines written in a steady hand. At my age, I do not ask life for grand promises anymore. I ask for clarity, usefulness, decent light in the kitchen, someone honest to talk to now and then, and a mind that still recognizes itself when the day begins. So far, those mornings have given me that much, and after what I nearly lost, I know better than to call that a little.